It's Christmas time, as my outfit will suggest, and that means it is time to start looking at your festive celebrations. Now, it's generally a warm time of the year in South Africa, so how do you combine some wine for the warm weather with wine that you can wash down some really good food with? Chenin Blanc is a pretty good bet, and I've got two terrific options for you available on the Dan Really Likes Wine store this December. Now, one of them is the Ken Forrester Old Vine. Now, this is a reserve Chenin Blanc that won for this particular 2021 vintage that we have on the store World's Best Chenin Blanc at the Decanter Wine Awards. World's Best, a South African wine, the best in the world, and it's completely sold out other than these 5 cases that you can get on the Dan Really Likes Wine store. Also available, 5 cases of this, the FMC. It's the premium, the flagship, the signature Chenin Blanc of the man who reinvented the grape for South Africa, and Ken Forrester with his 2021 vintage, giving you something that's luscious, it's full of richness, it's great on its own, but pair it up with some food and you've got a powerful festive combination. But that's not your only incentive to get hold of these. They're drinking so beautifully and so well priced at Norman Goodfellows. If you buy either of these, maybe a couple of them, you'll go into the draw and you can look like me, because you'll win one of these jumpers for joy, brought to you by the Nickel Foundation and Johnson Workwear, supporting both the Johnson Foundation and Reach for a Dream. All the proceeds from these jumpers going to a really good cause. If you want to get one straight away, you can head over to the Johnson website. Otherwise, buy a bottle of Chenin from Ken Forrester through the Dan Really Likes Wine store on Norman Goodfellows. Into the draw you go, and you won't just score some great wine, but a pretty cool jumper as well. Merry Christmas. And on that dazzling note of high fashion, a warm welcome to the final episode of Dan Really Likes Wine for 2023, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. That was both some really good Chenin Blanc from Ken Forrester, and look out for excitement with Ken and team next year, their 30th vintage on the horizon, but also that jumper for joy. If you're up in the Pretoria area, you might have heard me on the breakfast show with Jacaranda this morning, talking through a really fun concept with the Nickel Foundation. And thanks to everybody out there, and a number of people in the wine community have got their hands on them, not just looking really cool this Christmas, but also supporting 2 great causes, Reach for Dream and the Johnson Foundation. In fact, that doyen of high fashion, Mike Ratcliffe, the Emperor of Stellenbosch, has been seen in one of these. So clearly there is something to them. There is also something to today's show that I'm really looking forward to, because all 4 of our guests are wrapping up the year with their look back at 2023. What wines have rocked their worlds? What styles, interpretations, winemakers, regions, terroir have really stood out for them in the year? What wine experiences have made it extra special? And what are they going to be drinking over this coming Christmas? Now, the aforementioned Mike Ratcliffe, who wears 2 rather stylish hats, both as proprietor of Vilafonté and as the chair of Stellenbosch Wine Routes, will cast his eye back on the year that has almost been 2024, now just days away, really. The multi-award-winning Malu Lambert. Just go and Google. There's a 700-page Wikipedia entry, and that's just the awards for this year. Will give us the wine writer's perspective, and then 2 very good friends of mine from different parts of the Norman Goodfellows empire, Jason McEvoy, the CEO, and Mbali Zondo, the marketing director. What have people been drinking? What have we been buying? What's made a difference in South African wine this year? What does it bode for 2024? So all that to come on a rockstar final edition of Dan Really Likes Wine for 2023. But before our quartet of star guests join us, let's have a quick look at some wine news. Well, this was a little earlier on this week. On the left, the dashing figure of Hervé de la Besse, who for the day became Javier. Next to him, Tepang Molisana, who you might remember from My Kitchen Rules. She's also something of a celebrity in the real estate world, but for the purposes of this week, it's her wine writing side that came to the fore. And we were celebrating the Marquès de Mureta with Hervé, who brings in some really strong wine out of Rioja, tasting wine that has got 100 100 points for various itinerations, high 90s for many others. A lot of top wine critics around the world taking this Rioja and showcasing to the world just how good it really is. Not just the reds, fascinating white. In fact, the current vintage of their white is 1986, which sounds ridiculous. But again, wine that is a 100-pointer. Some terrific wine, some great food too at La Boqueria. Look out for this in the Dan Really Likes Wine store with Norman Goodfellows come January, a taste of Spain. And as whenever we have an international wine, we make this point very clearly on the show, it's not drinking a Spanish wine in this case instead of a South African wine, or replacing South Africa with an international wine, but instead getting some perspective, getting some context, getting to understand just how good South African wine is, while also making some great discoveries from other parts of the world. So thank you to Hervé and team, and look out for this online in January. Some really good Rioja from one of the biggest names in Spanish wine. Then at Blauklippen, I tell you what, Stellenbosch this Christmas, this summer holiday is absolutely packed with things to do, and that includes this weekend. In fact, kicks off today, running through to Sunday. It's the Twilight Christmas Market at Blauklippen, and this is always a great deal of fun. Just a really festive feel. Christmas markets in the UK, I love. There you're normally wrapped up with scarves and balaclavas and trying to keep the cold at bay. Here it's nice, warm, balmy Stellenbosch evenings, and your chance to meander through Blauklippen and discover a whole pile of Christmas fare, and I suspect a glass of wine or two. There's also the chance to head out to Kunjani Wines. This is on Christmas Day. If you really don't feel like all the cooking and washing up and preparation for Christmas at home, then Kunjani have got you covered. You can see the email address at the bottom there. Sunday lunch on Christmas Day. I think this sounds like a pretty good option. And then opera with a festive twist. And this one, I think you might actually have just missed this one. I think this one might have been yesterday. My apologies. But that was the Harmony of the Holidays. That was out at Ken Forrester. Probably Ken singing after a glass of wine or two. He does take on a bearded Pavarotti look. But what you can still get to is this Saturday, the pop-up collective market. And this is at Morgenhof Estate, 11 a.m. through to 7 p.m., either through the day or through to the evening. And it is on Sunday as well. Great spot, not just to enjoy yourself, but stock up on some Christmas gifts if you haven't got around to your Christmas shopping, particularly if you're one of those people who hits the 23rd of December and realizes you need to do some shopping. Elsewhere in Stellenbosch, you've got that whole list of stuff. You can head over to the Stellenbosch Wine Routes website to get some detail, but Christmas lunches also at the Marriott and at Clomalvern and at Veltevreden. You've got live music at Spear. That's from the 22nd of December all the way through to the end of January. And then if you've got some time tomorrow, there's also the Art Christmas Market at the Petite School in Peniel. So a very, very busy summer and Christmas period in Stellenbosch, and some great New Year's events as well at Vredenheim, at Clomalvern, and at Murati. So head over to the website if you want some more details on those. And I know Mike Ratcliffe and his fellow Stellenboschers, if that's the right word, will be more than happy to keep you entertained over a very, very busy Stellenbosch summer in the Winelands. All right, well, let's head into today's show, which I'm really looking forward to, because as we said in part one of this on Monday with Christian Eads and Greg Sherwood, who gave us a South African and an international verdict on the wine year that's passed, although there have been plenty of challenges, we're certainly not ignoring those, there have been some real high points for South African wine over the course of 2023. And I'm hoping that we'll get a similar sentiment from our four guests today. So a very warm welcome to the chair of Stellenbosch Wine Routes and proprietor at Vilafonté, Mike Ratcliffe, to multi-award-winning, I've lost count of how many she's won, wine writer extraordinaire Malu Lambert, a good friend of the show, and the powerhouse duo that make Norman Goodfellows what it is, Jason McEvoy and Mbali Zondo. Guys, welcome to all of you. Lovely to have you on the show and to have you joining us. Mike, kick us off, if you will. You fill a number of different positions in the wine industry, which gives you a range of perspectives. If you were asked to give a broad overview, 2023, has it been a good year for South African wine? Would you be nodding, even if a little gently? Do you feel overall we do come out with a pass mark for this year?
I think there is a pass mark, Dan, but it's the 80-20 principle once again, same as last year, same as the year before, where 20% of the brands are having an epic time and 80% of the brands are fighting. There's also disparity between the top end of the market and the bottom end of the market, where there are very different dynamics at play. But I think in general, it's been a good year. The rand has certainly helped for the exporters, but South African resilience just seems to continue in the domestic market.
Dial it down a little more specifically to Stellenbosch and the year that you've had as a region. I see a lot, I read a lot. It seems to me like it's been a particularly good year for Stellenbosch, not just with the wine, but across the associated hospitality and culinary spaces. Are you feeling quite bullish about where Stellenbosch is at the moment?
Yeah, we have the luxury of, many decades and centuries of experience to build on here. So Stellenbosch has had an exceptional year from a tourism point of view. The problem is we're out of hotel beds and out of restaurants. They're running at very high occupancies, which is not a bad problem for the restaurants, but it is a bad problem for future growth. From a wine perspective, I think Stellenbosch, the wine brand, is more united than ever before. I think the quality of the wine is better than ever before, and I think people are moving in the right direction. And the power of unity, where 130 wineries all stand together and point in the same direction, is remarkable. So I think you can expect that most people would agree it's been a good year, but very excited about 2024 coming soon.
All right, smile on the face of Mike Ratcliffe, which is not unusual, but good to see nonetheless. What about you, Malu, as you look back at 2023? We'll leave the personal accolades for a moment, because that's going to take a while. But as you cast your eye back on the wine year that has been, how are you feeling about how South African wine has done this past year?
So I also have a bit of a smile on my face, because when Mike said in the right direction, I just intuitively heard in the Ratcliffe direction. And that's, Mike is an absolute ambassador for our country and our wine, and the Ratcliffe direction is premiumization and getting our wines off these shores. So thank you for that, Mike, and that was my smile. So to your question, I'm a storyteller, Dan, as you know, and so I look at my year and I look at the stories I've told, and 2023 has been a year of catastrophe in a way. It was the hardest harvest on record in the last 2 decades. We had late March rains. We had catastrophic floods later in the year, nothing to do with harvest. But it's been a difficult year for vineyards, for infrastructure, for our country in terms of the soil and, the building ground. Sorry, I just want to apologize for the hustle and bustle. I'm at my favorite restaurant in the world, Food Barn in Noordhoek. I've just met with Dashboard, who presented me their, can you see it? Sorry, I don't know, I'm pointing. 5-star Platter award-winning Morsies, Steen. It deserves it. So that's why you hear the clatter of the crockery in the background. But to answer your question about this year, it was a year of challenges, but it was also a year that we got to see the class of the 2021 vintages and the 2019s.
And those have been written about in some detail by our award-winning wine writer, who picked up yet another major international award, which we'll hear about in just a second. Summing up 2023, Jason, from the perspective of a retailer, I guess you can look at different components of what you've sold. I'm sure there were some parts of the wine market that looked to be particularly buoyant, others perhaps not quite so much. What was your sense from what people were buying from Norman Goodfellows in 2023 over what was going well and what was maybe struggling just a touch?
So Dan, I did my homework for this, and I've got a nice little spreadsheet in front of me. So overall, wine was good in our business, and when I speak to the stats, it's within our business. Bordeaux Reds are up, and within those Bordeaux Reds, I think one of the biggest growth ones is seriously Old Dirt, which Mike will be pleased to hear. Cape Sam also up quite a bit, and Merlot up. Pinotage up a lot, and then red blends were down. So that'd be red blends outside of Bordeaux blends in our business, Rhone blends flat. So we thought on the red side, that was the trends our side. And then on the whites, Chenin Blanc up and Sauvignon Blanc down. That could be related to my wife's change in preference alone. And hopefully she's not watching the show. and then a trend I was very happy to see, and this is volume based. When all these stats are volume based, because if you bring price into it, then it can swing things a lot in terms of premiumization and how much effect that has on it. But Cap Classique is up almost 3% in our business at the expense of champagne on a volume basis. So that's very nice to see. I think that we make some amazing Cap Classiques, and I think on blind tastings would hand their more expensive French counterparts a bit of a clap, in my personal opinion.
Well, good news for South Africa there on the bubbles front, also the Chenin Blanc front, and some good results in the red space as well. I know Ken Forrester will be very happy with that Chenin Blanc news. Mbali, from the stats Jason gives us, from a marketing perspective, what's your interpretation in terms of what's been driving people in 2023 to buy what they have been, to drink what they have been, and to prefer the wines that they have?
So Dan, for me, I'm in a privileged position to be on the retail side and under the Norman Goodfellows umbrella. And for me, what I've seen over the years, particularly with our events that we have, is that people are definitely looking to explore more, which speaks to Jason's point on, the champagne versus the Cap Classique, and Cap Classique growing as a category in itself. So as much as, yes, there were financial challenges that Malu mentioned earlier, and some of the weather challenges that Western Cape experienced this year, people are definitely looking to explore a little bit more, maybe not buy more, but definitely willing to spend on different types of wine that they may not have had. But because they are less intimidated, they're a little bit more educated, or have a little bit more exploration within themselves to kind of dip a toe in and try out a variety that they've never had before, I think speaks to the quality and expertise that we have as a country, and as a region that produces absolutely good wine that is blowing the skies in an export market perspective. So people are definitely asking a whole lot more questions. There's definitely more people that are interested in getting the backstory about certain wines, and that is playing a whole role in terms of content creation, and making sure that we're not just selling wines because we have to make the bottom line, but we're selling wines that we truly believe in, and that we absolutely want to broaden our horizons as well as consumers' horizons, because we have the ability to have that variety in our stores.
I love the fact that a sense of adventure is coming through in our consumer market. A big part of that is having extraordinary people writing so excitingly about wine and getting people to try them, which leads me rather nicely back to our award-winning writer. You had an incredible experience in France this year, Malu. Before you tell me about that time in Bordeaux, tell me about the latest award, what this one was, and why it meant quite so much to you.
Thank you so much for giving me the airtime for that. It was a joint effort between myself, Joanne Gibson, and First Press Editions. I did put it forward because I do know, you gotta promote oneself sometimes, and luckily we got it. And I just happened to be in Paris at the time. But this isn't what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the Chenin Blanc Association, and actually what I did in Europe. Then. So we went to the rugby, we went to the awards, we did all these things. But I spoke to my friend Marco Janse, who owns a restaurant in Amsterdam. And I said, let's present the Chenin Top 10 there. And so we did. And what was amazing about that is not only was it the first time that the Chenin Top 10 has traveled out of South Africa for the first time, but it was also... we presented the translation or the interpretation into isiXhosa, isiZulu, and Shona of the Chenin Blanc wheels, and we showed the international guests these wheels, and that was the highlight of the trip for me. So thank you so much for the shout out for the award, but really the stand up for me was showing the international audience how South Africa and Chenin Blanc lights the way for language inclusivity and culture inclusivity.
You referenced Mike a little earlier as a great South African wine ambassador. I think you're doing a pretty good job of the same yourself. Mike, you did have some ambassadorial duties because you put together, and I remember you sending me the email and me doing my level best to work out how I could possibly sneak onto this remarkable adventure. I think you brought rugby and wine together, possibly like nobody else ever has before. And given the results in a South African context, all the more so. Tell me about this wine and rugby trip and what a truly unforgettable experience it was.
Well, I think it was following in the footsteps of Janie Engelbrecht and Jan Boylan Coetzee, but in this case, without any kind of rugby talent whatsoever. So we took 30 of our top customers from South Africa to the World Cup, both semi-finals and the final, but we managed to squeeze in 3 days in Bordeaux. There's me. 3 days in Bordeaux, 3 days in Champagne, visited some of the great wineries, Le Pen, there's Pierre Latour, Cheval Blanc, Pichon, Bollinger, Primancourt, just incredible places. There's a 5-litre bottle of 2000 Pichon, which was pretty epic. And so we managed to wrap up all the wine in the Springbok colours. And I think without sounding too pompous, I think that our contribution might have been quite significant in bringing the trophy home, Dan.
And was that purely from the scale of South African invasion you took with you, and possibly throwing the French off kilter with the amount of fine wine you were able to relieve them of?
Well, to tell you the truth, it was really impressive, the green tidal wave that descended on Paris. But I remember going to Cheval Blanc, and they don't really do visits very often, but we were held up because there was a group of South Africans in front of us. And they have days when nobody ever visits, but on this day, the Green Army was invading Cheval Blanc. So, yeah, that was quite entertaining. But, you know, going back to one of the comments at the earlier part of the show, you were talking about being able to taste great Spanish wine so that you can get context of what great South African wines should taste like. And I think that as we move forward as a country, as a wine industry, we need to make sure that we are constantly exploring our competitors' offerings, because it's going to make us stronger. And so while I felt very happy about drinking the great wines of the world in Bordeaux, I just couldn't stop thinking that the greatest wines of South Africa easily punch above their weight and often beat the great wines of France. It's pretty satisfying to see that.
That's a wonderful endorsement of our wine, and particularly coming from people like yourself and Malu, who both got to drink terrific French wine this year. I got to drink some Spanish wine last week, some French wine myself while I was over at the World Cup, and then again last month in Bordeaux. Somebody got to drink some Italian. Also head of international exploration at Norman Goodfellows. Mbali, I had to almost stop following you on Instagram at one point this year because your stories and pictures and recollections from Italy were just wonderful. What was that trip like from a food and wine perspective, and what perspective in turn did it give you on South African food and wine?
So Dan, I must say that trip was amazing. Came back probably a few kilograms heavier, you know, having pasta and pizza almost every day. But just from a, you know, quality perspective, their gelatos are amazing, their desserts. I must say, to Mike's point, really lovely wine from an international perspective and an Italian wine perspective. But I think I've got to agree with Mike here. We cannot disregard how great and amazing our South African wines are. And I really do believe that some, if not all of them, in certain categories or varietals, to Mike's point, do punch above their weight, and we really do fly the South African flag sky high. But to that point, you know, coming back from Italy made me just appreciate our palates. It made me appreciate the fact that, you know, from a cost perspective, I wasn't trying to sell my liver on the black markets just to get a glass of wine, and that I could enjoy if not exactly the same, even better quality wine at almost half the price. So I think we are spoiled for choice here in South Africa, but it doesn't take away the fact that we are producing some amazing wines. And yeah, I also think that, now and then making sure that you're aware of what other nations or countries are producing does really give you the perspective of, number one, where you come from, but also an idea of where we could go as potential as well.
We mentioned Helve from Premier Crew, people like himself, like Derek Kilpin at Great Domains, Michael Fridjon with Reciprocal, all bringing some really interesting international wine into South Africa. How much Mbali is our local market trying these wines, appreciating them, and maybe learning from the words of Mike and Malu and yourself as to, yes, international wine's great, but it does reinforce how good our local stuff is?
So I think, like I said before, there is an exploration for wine in general, and I think people are more open to trying what is great, what is good, and if something isn't, perhaps meeting their palate for any specific reason, there's still that knowledge of, okay, look, I've tried it, but there are, I don't mean to brag, but we've got your online pop-up store where you did a series with the Fantini guys on the Fantini Calalenta Merlot Rosé and another 2 varietals which we stock in our stores. So that in itself, being able to have a wide variety of international wines that are endorsed, that are winning the awards, that are being written about, so there are positive reviews. The fact that you can access them here in South Africa as well through our retail stores is absolutely amazing.
There is just so much access now to wines of the world, and Norman Goodfellows is a very good place to start. You did some traveling in Bali. We know that Malu's done plenty of traveling this year. Mike's done plenty of traveling. I've done a fair bit. Nobody quite like Jason, though, in this context. And we're just lucky to have him in South Africa this week before his next adventure. There has been plenty of travel. Jason, what really stood out, and where in the world have you found some wine that has considerably enhanced your own personal wine story?
So I've been very blessed with travel, and maybe my shareholders didn't like it as much as I did. What really was obvious, what became obvious to me is how amazing this African wine is in the context of price. So trying to drink decent wine overseas costs a fortune. There is some amazing wine. A highlight for me would probably be in Paris. After the quarterfinals, we went to a restaurant called Coco, and I'm not going to butcher the name of the wine I drank, also probably because there were so many bottles, and I can't quite remember. I do have a picture, but it was outstanding wine, and so it should be at 280 euros a bottle. So 2 things. One is African wine punches way above its weight category in quality. But when I traveled, I also went to all the retail stores that I could, and the wine that's available in overseas, South African wines available overseas, is some premium and a lot of really entry-level stuff in supermarkets. So I think that we've done a terrible job of South African wine brand. When you're paying, I can't mention brands, but must be careful. But when a wine that sells for 30 Rand here is selling for 250 Rand or something like that in a supermarket, or 160 Rand in a supermarket, 180 Rand in a supermarket, and we know what 30 or 40 Rand wine tastes like, we do ourselves a disservice in terms of the wine category and getting people to drink South African wine internationally.
It is not a new point raised, but it is one worth reaffirming. I think there are nudges in the right direction, and I'm hoping 2024 will see more of that. We've still got a little of 2023 to finish, though. What were the best wines from South Africa that our 4 guests today tried? We'll find out straight after this. And so to the challenge so many of us will face this Christmas. The whole family's piling around for a big lunch or dinner, and you need to find some wine that satisfies a range of tastes and doesn't cost the earth. Well, here's a pretty good recommendation from Dan Really Likes Wine. This is Boschendal and this 1685 Merlot. Now, 1685 wasn't when this wine was made. That is when this majestic estate down in the Cape kicked off. The wine is a lot younger, but already it's in a space where it's really easy to drink. Merlot itself is a softer grape. It doesn't have the tannins of something like a Cabernet Sauvignon, so it's not going to be abrasive to drink, and it's going to sit really easily against your gammon or your turkey or the braai that you're doing over Christmas. It's just the kind of wine that sits happily and makes friends with just about everybody. And it'll make friends with your bank manager, because this at 159 rand for a very good bottle of South African red is, I think, something you can look for at Norman Goodfellows to satisfy both a reasonable price but also some very pleasant wine, and one that'll put a lot of smiles on faces over your Christmas celebration. And not just when you're trying to wash down some food, but also perhaps to just take the sting out of a long day of unwrapping presents, looking after family and taking care of Christmas. Have a great holiday, wash it down with some great South African wine. Merry Christmas. So there we go, one of our Christmas suggestions for you as we build into the real revelry, which kind of kicks off from tomorrow with the public holiday I spent this morning with the Springboks and Mercedes-Benz, a full house of people looking forward to a Christmas break as the holidays begin. And you're probably now at the stage where you're thinking, right, well, I'd like to celebrate with a really special bottle at some point. Maybe it's a gift for somebody. Maybe it's something to really light up Christmas for you and either celebrate or drown out sorrows after the year, whichever point of departure. So let's find out from our guests what particular wine has really rocked their worlds. Mbali, let's kick off with you from the wine that you taste very diligently and very professionally through the year. What in particular in 2023 has made you smile?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask, Dan. I've got some 3 favorites and I'll mention them now. First and foremost, I'm not a red girl, but I must say, coming from an ex-rugby player, Beast's wine collection, the Cab Sav Syrah, really blew me away. Really love that red or red blend. Absolutely doing well in stores, and so I'm excited to see what Beast does next year, particularly with us as Norman Goodfellows and some of the events that we're trying to get our heads around. So that's number 1. Number 2 has got to be the Holden Mines Chardonnay. I'm a white girl, but it was such a pleasure to drink a Chardonnay that wasn't just so full of wood, but had character, that was bold, and I absolutely love it, seeing as though we've just come out of a heat wave. And last but not least, something that's a little bit more easy drinking. I've mentioned before in a couple of shows that my mother is a staunch Zulu woman and mom, so she had to have a reawakening when it came to alcohol and some wine. So I'd rather say the Delheim Staying Alive Riesling. Lovely to have with a couple of friends, and also just to pair with some seafood. I'm also a seafood fanatic, so those are my top 3 for this year.
I think that's a really, really cool selection. All wines that we have tasted and celebrated through the course of the year. So mark those down on your list and then prepare for a much longer list, because there's 0 chance we'll restrict Malu to just 3 wines. Ms. Lambert, 2023, you've written about so much wonderful wine. Your Cinsault piece of decanter recently was brilliant. I know we're going to do a show early in the new year just around Cinsault. What is it that even somebody who tastes and writes about so much wine still got excited about in 2023?
Thank you, Dan, for asking such a detailed question. And as usual, I'll completely ignore you and have my own answer. So, first of all, I just want to address the overseas question. And I was in Bordeaux and I visited all the semesters, Haut-Briand, Montmagueux, Lefon, etc. in French. And what they have and what we don't have is government support. So that, I think, is a big heading question mark to that. And these cellars are mammoth, they are huge. Every barrel is a person's home in South Africa. So here in South Africa, we don't have the support of the government, but we have the support of our winemakers, our wine lovers, our wine writers, our wine marketers, and that's what makes our industry dynamic. So, to your original question, what I enjoyed about this year, I'm actually going to start with Chardonnay, believe it or not. I've always loved Chardonnay. It's a wine I lean for, when I actually want to drink. in front of the TV or with friends or whatever. Chardonnay is what I want. So beginning of this year started with Chardonnay colloquium in Elgin, and Elgin showed its prowess very much with this grape, as it does with Pinot Noir. So yeah, oh God, it's hard to choose. But it's not Elgin, it's Restless River. 2021, Eva Maria, that is my favorite Chardonnay this year. So I'll start there. But then I'll go into other categories like Chenin Blanc. So last year I wrote about the West Coast. I don't know if you read it, Dan. I'm not sure. You must tell me. But the West Coast is surprising in a number of ways, and it's surprising for Grenache, and it's surprising for Colombard. Colombard is never going to take Chenin's crown. Not in this century, maybe in 2 centuries, because that's how old wines work. But I've been very interested by the West Coast Colombard, especially by that of Sac-Mouton. Sorry, is it very noisy?
No, absolutely fine. Keep going.
Guys, keep it down. Shh. Guys, what are you doing? They're blowing up some kind of giant balloon. Can I show you the Christmas tree? Have a look. Can you see it? It fills the whole of the food barn. Guys, keep it down, man. I'm on a TV show here. Sorry. Luckily, they know me well. I'm a regular. What was I saying? Okay, so what I was interested in this year. And so Colombard struck a chord. But the thing with Colombard and the whole brandy gang, as I like to call them, so Chenin Blanc is obviously first team brandy gang. And then we have Colombard, and then we have Palomino, and then we have Claire Blanche, and then we have Muscat. So these are all planted voraciously around the winelands to produce brandy. And most of the co-ops forgot about them. And now these vineyards still lie in these previously undervalued regions, shall we call them. And now they're making fantastic wines. One is in my glass here. It's the Dashboard, which is a uni wine brand, which is their whole purpose is they're a large cooperative, and they made a point to find heritage plots around the Bredder Curve to make these wines from, and the wine is stunning. Anyway, moving on. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. The other big thing I found interesting about this year was the interest into America. So America has been a traditionally hard market to crack, and Mike, I'm sure you are listening here with interest. So that South Africa just can't get into that market. It's a difficult market for anything, I suppose, because there are 50 different countries in one. Apologize. There are 50 different markets in one state. But what we've noticed is that the black-owned wine labels are making inroads into these states, which is quite incredible. So we have people like Sinashi Nayakondado, we have Joseph Defana, we have Indy from Kali's Finest Wines. They're all making inroads. I mean, Sinashi has wines in 42 of the 50 states, which I think is incredible.
Some great news stories, some great wine there for you to put onto your list that Malu has recommended. Let's find out from Jason, who also gets to drink some pretty cool wine. We've had some good wine together over the course of this year. Jason, what's really stuck out for you? What has been wine that's made you all waving? Yep, I could definitely have some more of this.
I think so on my list, I made it. So definitely with this, that 2012 we had at your house of the Buchanan's Cliff was Buchanan's Cliff's Syrah was okay. Buchanan's Cliff was outstanding. In my to drink list, we've been drinking a lot of on the white side. Iona Sauvignon Blanc, their single vineyard Cliff Chardonnay is outstanding. A bit of a treat, but worth it in my opinion. Boschendal Nicholas, the Shiraz Dominant, Cab Franc Petit Verdot, good value, and when you're entertaining, to open a couple bottles of that doesn't break the bank account. One of my favorite varietals in the whole world, Pinot Noir, the Paul Kluwer Estate Pinot Noir, I think this year's Estate Pinot Noir is excellent. And then if you're feeling like spoiling yourself, you can always reach for the Seven Flags, but that is a spoil. Anything else? Then what actually does stand out on the Chardonnay side would also be the Almondkerk Chardonnay, which we, after going to the farm earlier this year, discovered.
We had a great time down there early on the air. In fact, we've got another wine tour planned for early next year, which I'm already looking forward to. What about Mr. Ratcliffe? And I must paraphrase this, Mike, but just adding a word of appreciation, and that the amount of wine you post on social media and talk about is not just wonderfully instructive, but is very socialist in its nature. Yes, you have your own brand, and yes, you look after the Stellenbosch brands, but you're very good at celebrating wine from all over South Africa, and I really do appreciate that. From the many wines you've got to sample this year, what has been top of the list for you?
Well, first on my wish list is I'd like to have at least a bottle of what Malu's had today, because obviously it did the trick just really well. So good job, Malu. I'd like to just jump on what Mbali said, Riesling. I mean, if you want to go left field, there's some fascinating Rieslings coming out of South Africa. Who would have guessed? And there's hardly any planted, but from Simmonsich to Constantia, the Sauerwein Chi Riesling is just outrageously good. So there's a left field recommendation for this year. Something else that I've thoroughly enjoyed, agreeing again with Malu, is Chardonnay. The Chardonnay Renaissance continues at a massive breakneck speed. South African Chardonnay is really punching above its weight, and we're starting to see the emergence of brands, which is about bloody time. I think the hot trend that you need to watch, and it's coming out of Stellenbosch, is high altitude Chardonnay, all the way around the top slopes of the Helderberg, from Uwamira to Delagraaf to Oldenburg, Bartony, Capensis, Thelema, Waterford. I can just keep going. High altitude Chardonnay is definitely going to be a thing. It's already a thing, but I think it's being recognized as that. And I'm going to stay on white wine, because there's no point talking about red, since that's all that I make and I drink a lot of it. I'm not going to talk about the incredible journey of international wines I've had this year, but a particular favorite this year, and was a gift, was from Donovan Roll, was a magnum of the 2022 Roll White. And I thought about sharing it with my wife, but then it was only a magnum, so I had to drink it all by myself. But what a great wine from the Swartland. It was fantastic. So it's all white tonight, Dan, and that's my Christmas tribute.
That's a wonderful, wonderful selection. Mike, drawing from a quote that is variously attributed to Churchill, to Ken Forrester, to assorted others, a magnum is the perfect bottle of wine for two people having lunch when one of them doesn't drink. One of the other spaces you fill, Mike, is with Wine Business Advisors, where you're very heavily involved in a lot of the business of South African wine. What have been the headline stories there for you in 2023?
Wow, I mean, that's such a great question. Well, look, I'm not sure that many people know, but 2023, from a mergers and acquisition point of view, is definitely a high watermark in the history of South African wine. The amount of transactions that are taking place, the amount of interest in South African wine, both domestically and internationally, is quite staggering. And I don't see the trend slowing down in 2024. The industry is changing right in front of our faces. We are becoming more competitive, more international. The capital is flooding in. And the big boys haven't even woken up yet, but they will. So, I think it's super exciting, an injection of skill, talent, and South African wine is starting to gain access to the big international distribution channels, and that's going to be very interesting. And don't think that Advini is slowing down, or the Grand Chez de France is slowing down, or Mauritius. They're all looking around. They've seen the opportunity. So, it's very dynamic time in the South African wine industry.
from a retail perspective, Jason, is that something that you concur with? That seeing this kind of investment that Mike speaks of, it is going to drive the industry forward in the right way, and that we should be bullish about what sits on our wine horizon?
So I think that the great advantage of investment in wine, whether new investment in wine, whether it's foreign or local, is that wine takes a big balance sheet. So if you are able to hold your wine back for an extra year, it makes a huge difference, especially on the reds. And if you are so when you get foreign money coming in, when you convert it at the euro or the dollar or the pound, it's very easy to fund holding wines back until they're ready, releasing slightly older vintages, and that I think would be good for the industry. And I think we have seen a bit of that. DGB has invested massively in the Helderfontein area. I think I might have got that slightly wrong. You can correct me maybe. But they've invested massively and pulled out vines and replanted, and they'll only start generating revenue in 6 years from now. But that speaks massively to their belief in the South African wine industry and to the DGB investments in the South African wine industry. Which is very positive and will help us continue to improve a really high level of South African wine in this country.
It has been a very big story in the wine industry this year. And if you go back about a month or so, you can watch on Dan Really Likes Wine, our interview with Tim Hutchinson, the chair of DGB, talking about that Helderberg investment and what they believe is such an important part of preserving heritage, but also preserving the future of South African wine. All right, let's look at Christmas. And it's a two-part question for each of our guests as we wrap up our last show of 2023. We'll start with you, Mbali. What are you going to be drinking with Christmas this year? And ideally, in a perfect world where money is no option, what's sitting under the Christmas tree for you this year?
Thanks, Dan. Love that question. For me, I am spending Christmas with family in Durban. So we're looking at hot, sticky, humid weather. I need something absolutely cooling. So I'm looking at drinking a whole lot of Charles Fox MCC, particularly the Reserve Gold varietal. So very excited for that. And absolutely, if money was not an option, I would definitely, particularly with some dried meat. Can you see the Zulu girl coming out in me? Some Fusion 5 Detour Fusion 5 red blend.
That's a very, very good call indeed. A consistently fantastic South African wine from the team at Detour. All right, Malu, what about you? What are you going to be drinking in the Republic of Nurduk over Christmas this year? And although there's probably not much more wine you need, given who you are and what you do, are there a special bottle or two that you'd love to find wrapped up on the 25th?
Well, hopefully not wine, because I get wine all year through. Joking. I love wine. Thank you for all the wine. I like the 21s, if I must admit. I think the 21s are incredible. The Compostela was sensational. Mike, your Series C 2021 was incredible. It's really nice to see them in this space in the 2023 year and how they've come along. There are some Chardonnays that are coming through too, the Restless River, as I've said. But what's quite interesting and what I wanted to, talk about, what you were talking about, Mike, was this rarity of South African wine. And one of the rarities is Muscat. And we've been planting two of the strains of Muscat since the 1600s. So the Alexandria, which is the Hanepoort, and the Frontignan, which is, makes the Van de Constance, the Fleur etc. So the fancier one. It doesn't mean it's better. The one is bigger variant, the one is smaller variant. But what I've discovered this year, and later in this year, are the dry versions of the Muscat. And they're quite enchanting. They're quite of this place. And, when traveling this year, when showing them Chenin Blanc from South Africa, it's quite something special to go, look, here is this acidity, this fruit, this dryness that you don't get in the Loire, not really. This is South Africa, it's so distinctly South Africa. And the muscats that I've been drinking this year, the dry muscats. So City on a Hill, Dan Colombo, Dashboard Skin Contact, but they have a bit of Chenin Blanc in there, etc., etc., etc. That's quite exciting for me because it's got this signature of South Africa about it. But as Mike says, it won't spread across the sandwich. So what do we do? What do we do with these rarefied commodities? It's the same with Riesling. You know, I just had this most amazing Riesling tasting the other day. And we went back to 1987. And this Riesling was singing. It was so beautiful. It does so well on the cool aromatic slopes of Constantia. But no one wants to drink it. No one wants to buy it. So what do we do about these rarefied, beautiful grapes? As early as the 1990s, sorry, I'm going to podcast a bit here, but as early as the 1990s, Muscat was the sixth most planted grape in our national vineyard. Today, 2023 almost, 2024, it only accounts for 2%. And the majority of that is making up sweet wines. No one drinks them. That's a real tragedy because I enjoy them. But to be fair, I probably drink them once every 2 months. So that shows how the trend is going. But there are winemakers like City on the Hill, Dan Colombo, Saki Mouton, Dashboard, etc., who are making dry muscats, who respect the grape's aromatic potential without it becoming blousy and floral. There's still that kind of like that little line, and on the palates, they've dialed down that overt fruitiness. And I think you should look at dry muscats. Is my 2004 prediction. And sorry, I'm going on, but there you go.
You sum up something we've spoken about so often on the show this year with so many winemakers, the challenge of being able to make a range of varietals so well and having to decide what to make, given that the market often doesn't respond quite as enthusiastically as we wish they would. And some of those grapes are prime examples. Jason, Christmas, what is at the sprawling McEvoy Christmas table and what ideally is wrapped up under the tree?
So this Christmas, we actually off to Salt Lake City, Utah, to visit a friend, and I've made it a bit of a challenge to bring some older South African reds with me. So on Christmas, there are two wines that we are spoiling everyone with, and I'm quite excited about. The one is Paul Sauer 2009, and the second one is Vilafonté Series C 2010. And we're going to have more than one bottle of each because you need to, and that's going to show off to our American hosts the amazing South African red wines that we have. In terms of finding wine under my tree, I'm very blessed to drink amazing wines. I suppose, no, I think I'm very blessed to drink amazing wines.
Well, you're taking some terrific wine. In fact, that'll comfortably be the best wine in Salt Lake City, principally because it's a Mormon city that's largely dry. So unless you take some wine with you, you might not find much else. But what great wines to take with you, that 09 Paul Sauer and the Series C from the year thereafter. I know there'll be a smile on Mike Ratcliffe's face at hearing that. Mike, for you, has the Ratcliffe wine list been ratified for 2023 for Christmas? And once you have got that done, what are you hoping for a Christmas gift?
You know, firstly, I might have just changed my mind because at the beginning of this this chat about 45 minutes ago, Malu had a full bottle of Dashboard and now she's got an empty bottle. So it must be really good. I'm going to definitely seek out some of that. But yeah, so this Christmas is going to be a year of 2013 for me. I've got a Magnum of 2013 Vilafonté Series C. So I'm allowed to drink my own wine and I will. But as a white wine to accompany that, I've also got a Magnum of the 2013 Chapoutier La Mille, which is just outrageously good wine. I've never even seen it in Magnum, and now I've got one. So yeah, it's gonna be big bottles all around at my house, and this time I think Mrs. Ratcliffe is also invited.
I've got no doubt she'll take up the invitation. Mike, just to close up the show, given you fill so many different roles and such important ones within the wine industry, beyond the wine to drink or to get for Christmas, what would your Christmas wish be for the South African wine industry in an ideal world?
Well, I think South Africa needs to keep consolidating and doing what it is already doing, which is premiumizing. Premiumizing is a fancy term that gets bandied around left, right, and center. But if you want to take it right back to its basics, it's a word that I've used for a decade on every soapbox I can find, which is the word confidence. You know, we waxed lyrical on this program today about how great South African wines are, and I just think that there's a disconnect at the moment. I think that more South African winemakers could possibly put their shoulders back and just acknowledge and be more confident, be more on the front foot about the outrageous quality that we tend to exhibit towards the world. And over time, you know, people that are complaining about not making any money, I've always said that the best way to get your price up is just to put it up. And if you're struggling and your quality is there, I think this premiumization train, my wish would be that the premiumization train continues. And just to define that a little bit more, if you are selling a wine at $60 and you're not making any money, you know, you can put the price up 10% or 15% to $70 and actually make some money. So premiumization isn't about taking on the first growth. It's about actually asking for your wine what you think it's worth so that you can make a fair crust. So there you go. There's my wish, Dan.
It is a space that's been spoken of a lot this year, that premium drive. We heard Jason mention some of those lower shelf supermarket wines that don't really do us too many favors. People like Mike, so important in changing that narrative, as people like Malu are so important in terms of telling the stories that change that narrative. And people like Jason and Mbali, so important in selling that wine at these prices that give fair reward to our wine producers and our winemakers. So 2024, the year of premiumization as the South African wine space continues, we hope, to grow and to expand and to flourish. And that wraps us up for Dan Really Likes Wine 2023. Guys, to all of you, thank you so much. Mike, it's always a pleasure having you on the show and sharing what is happening in the worlds of Stellenbosch and Vilafonté and wine business advisors. So thank you very much for being part of the show today. To Malu, keep winning those awards. Keep writing beautifully. There is nobody I enjoy reading more about the wine industry than you. So keep that up, and thanks for all the support to the show. And Mbali and Jason is there. He's just standing sideways. He works out a lot. There we go. Jason is back. Mbali, Jason, we're coming up to almost a year now with our partnership.
I know.
I'm
And
waving my frantically at your producer. Sinso. Well, we've got a show coming up with Sinso. We should all
with
be
Malu.
living in Sin. S-I-N.
I think some of us maybe today.
So maybe look forward to a Dan show next year where I talk about my favorite Sinso producers. But in the latest edition of the Canter, I do have a selection of Sinsos. And what's interesting about that is what we previously thought traditionally about Sinso. It's actually not that easy to grow, but it's creating a kind of big kind of show around it because of the kind of winemakers that are interested in it, and it's to be premium quality. So take a look at that.
I'll look out for that. We are planning that. That's a special edition with Malu and the best of Sinso. But do head to the Canter to read that piece. Malu, thank you. And thank you for being part of today's show. Mike as well. And to Mbali and Jason, as I say, almost a year into their partnership with Norman Goodfellows. It's been so much fun taking this wine journey with you both, and I know we've got many more adventures still to come, which leads me to thank you all, not just for being part of the show, but for all of your support over the course of the year for both the show and for the South African wine industry. Have an absolutely fabulous Christmas break, and it's not going to be too long into 2024 before we have all of you back and look ahead to what I'm sure will be another wonderful year for South African wine. So thank you guys, much appreciated, and have a lovely wine-fueled Christmas.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
So
Go.
Our very special guests for our last show of the year with Norman Goodfellows, Mike Ratcliffe, Malu Lambert, Mbali, Zondo, and Jason McEvoy, summing up a year that's not been without its challenges, but has certainly had much to look back on with pride and with satisfaction, both for the consumer and for the wine producer. Now, that does it for this year, and I must just say a big thank you to all of you out there watching. We've got a very dedicated and very loyal viewership, and thank you for that. We look forward to plenty more of the same in 2024. As always, send through your thoughts, your comments, and anything you'd like to see on the show, and we will do our level best to accommodate you. And particularly in January, look out for some shows from the island of St. Helena, amongst others. That does it for today. We'll leave you with one last set of wines to look out for your Norman Goodfellows shopping. Thank you all. Have the most wonderful Christmas, and we'll see you back in 2024 for more great conversations about more great wine. Merry Christmas and goodbye. This December on the Dan Really Likes Wine digital store with Norman Goodfellows, my good friend Gerard Holden has offered me a couple of crackers in limited edition to help sort out your festive wine stock requirements. Now, one of those is a Chardonnay, and Chenin and Chardonnay both for me are critical over Christmas because you can chill them down to take the sting out of a summer's day, but they've also got the potential to work so well with a whole range of food. And in the case of this, it's the 2020 barrel fermented Chardonnay from Holden Mans, so it's got a few extra years on it, just giving it a little bit more depth of flavor and a bit more richness, perfect for the kind of food you're probably going to be having over Christmas. And then there is the Proprietor's Blend, lush red wine that's going to put a lot of smiles on faces, whether you're unwrapping presents or devouring large plates of Christmas celebration. Either way, you've got two great wines, and if you bring them together, I think pretty much everybody at your Christmas table is going to find something they like, probably two of them. So that is both the Proprietor's Blend and the barrel fermented Chardonnay from Holden Mans Wine out of the heart of Franchuk, one of my favorite people in the wine industry, giving us on the Dan Really Likes Wine store a couple of really good options for your Christmas wine list this year. Enjoy the wine and have a wonderful Christmas.